Hello students, we shall be discussing about environmental acts today. I am Dr. Afilon, Professor Division of Environmental Science, West Kashmir. The broad outline of this lecture is that we should first know which article in Indian Constitution are related to the conservation of the environment, then Environmental Protection Act 1986, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, then Wildlife Protection Act 1972, and finally Forest Conservation Act 1980. As far as the articles in Indian Constitution which are related to the conservation of environment are concerned, the first article related to this is Article 21, and this article guarantees the fundamental rights to life and personal liberty and various aspects of a dignified life, such as the right to healthy environment. Then one more article came. That article is Article 48A, and this article comes under the directive principle of the state policy. It implies that states shall have endeavor to protect the environment. It also emphasizes on safeguarding the forest and wildlife of the country, and this article imposes a duty on state to protect the environment from pollution by adopting various measures. Then Article 51AG. This article states that it shall be the duty of each and every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment that includes lakes, rivers, forests, and wildlife. So Article 48 is basically the article which is related to the states, while as the Article 51AG is related to all citizens of India, and it's their prime duty to conserve the environment. Then Environmental Protection Act 1986. This is a very important act. It came into existence in 1986, and it has 26 sections and 4 chapters. This act is widely considered as to have been a response to the Bhopal gas leak, which occurred in December 3, 1984. And this act was passed by the Government of India under the Article 253 of the Constitution of India, which empowers union governments to enact laws to give effect to international agreements signed by the country. And the purpose of this act is to implement the decisions of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which took place in Stockholm Conference in 1972. And as far as this act is concerned, it is an umbrella legislation that has provided a framework for the environment regulations regime in India, which covers all major industrial and infrastructural activities and prohibits and regulates specific activities in coastal areas. This act also provides for coordination of the activities of various central and state authorities established under other environmental related laws such as Water Act and the Air Act. Then as far as the main provision of this is concerned, main provision of this law is basically this act covers all forms of the pollution: air, water, soil, and noise. It provides safe standards for the presence of various pollutants in the environment. It prohibits the use of hazardous materials unless prior permission is taken from the central government. So the other provisions are general powers of the central government, then the standards and procedures, like the government can lay down standards for air, water, and soil quality, etc. Then the restriction on the hazardous substances, then powers of entry and inspection. That means authorities have the power to enter, inspect, and collect samples of air, water, and soil wherever they wish. Power to issue directions. The central government can issue directions, orders including closure, prohibition, and they can also regulate or stop supply of electricity, water, or services. Then penalties are also there. Penalties, which means imprisonment up to 5 years or fine up to 1 lakh for contravention of the Act's provisions. And then rule-making powers. Central government can make the rules or procedures, safety measures, permissible limits, and authorities responsible. And then finally, the role of the citizens. That means individuals can directly approach courts for violations. However, they can file complaints after giving 60 days notice to the authorities. So these are all the main provisions of the Environmental Protection Act. Then one more important act of the environment is the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. And this act was a law passed by the Parliament of India to prevent and control the harmful effects of air pollution in India. And this act is seen as the first concrete step taken by the government of India to combat air pollution. And why was this air pollution act passed? The effect of climate change caused by all forms of pollution became all too apparent in early 70s. To mitigate their harmful effects, it was believed that nations would need to pass their own laws. Thus, during the United Nations General Assembly on Human Rights, Human Environment, held in Stockholm in June 72, a resolution was passed which implored nations of the world to preserve natural sources such as air. India itself had issues regarding air pollution due to a wide variety of factors such as stubble burning, improper industrial practices, environmental practices, etc. And then to combat these factors, a special law was enacted under the Constitution of India, which was called as Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. As far as the main provisions are concerned, there are so many provisions like establishment of central pollution boards and state pollution control boards. Then the air pollution has been defined in the main provisions. Then air pollution control areas, that means SPC has the power and it can declare any area as an air pollution control area. Then consent required for industries. Industries must obtain prior consent from SPCB, that means State Pollution Control Board. And similarly, standard of emissions. CPCB laid down nationwide standards for emissions from industrial plants and automobiles. SPCB enforces the standards locally. Then powers of the boards. So boards have the powers to inspect industries, collect samples, and monitor emissions. Then penalties also. Contravention of the provisions may lead to imprisonment up to 3 months or the fine up to rupees 10,000 or both. Then you have got citizens' rights. Individuals can file complaints in the court, but only after 60 days notice to this SPCB. And then amendments have been also done to this act in 1987, strengthened the act by giving more powers to the pollution boards involving citizens' participation, and also empowering boards to close industries and stop electricity water supply in case of the violations. So this was all about the Air Pollution Act. Now Water Prevention and Control Pollution Act 1974, and this act basically was enacted to prevent and control water pollution in India, and was amended in 1988 as well as in 2020 as well as in 2003. And the main aims of this act are that prohibition on polluting streams and wells, that the reporting of accidental discharge means that these industries require operations or positions to inform the state boards about any accidental discharge of poisonous matter into a stream, well, or sewer on inland. The Water Prevention Control of Air Pollution cess was also enacted to levy and collect a cess on water consumed by the certain types of industrial units. The cess is used to augment the resources of the central and state boards for water pollution prevention and control. Then main provisions of this act are the same as we have seen in the air pollution, like the establishment of boards in the form of Central Pollution Control Board as well as the State Pollution Control Board. Then there was the definition of the water pollution in the main provisions, how we can define the water pollution. Then consent required for industries. Industries are required to obtain prior consent of the SPCB before establishing or taking away any steps to discharge sewage, trade effluents into streams, wells, sewers, or land. SPCB may grant consent with the specific conditions. Then the functions of the boards have also been defined in this act, like the functions of the CPCB and the functions of the SPCB. Then power of the boards, like to inspect, collect samples, and check treatment plants. Then the prohibition of disposal of pollutants has also been mentioned in this act. Then penalties. Government may lead to imprisonment up to 3 months or both. And then citizens, though individuals can file complaint in court about water pollution, provided they give 60 years notice to the concerned board. And then amendments also have been done in this act, like the amendment of 1988, which has strengthened the act by empowering boards to close industries as well as allowing disconnection of water and electricity supply for polluting units, as well as the increasing penalties. Then we have got the most important act, one that's called as Wildlife Protection Act. And this act provides for the protection of the country's wild animals, birds and plant species in order to ensure environmental and ecological security, to preserve biodiversity. It came into existence in 1972 and this act was transferred from the state list to the Upper Council list in 1977, thus giving powers to the central government. Among other things, the act lays down restrictions on human hunting many animal species. The act was also amended in the year 2006, and this amendment bill was introduced in the Rajya Sabha in 2013 and referred to the Standing Committee in 2015. Then this act, basically there are functional provisions for the Wildlife Act. One is the Article 48A, which I have already discussed, and then the Article 51A, and they are very important acts. They support the Wildlife Act of 1972. Then, as far as the history is concerned, the first such law was passed by the British government in 1887, which was called as the Wild Birds Protection Act in 1887. And this law sought to prohibit the possession and sale of specified wild animals and birds. And second law was enacted in 1912 called the Wild Birds and Animal Protection Act. This was amended in 1935 when the Wild Birds and Animal Protection Amendment Act was passed. During the British Raj, wildlife protection was not accorded on priority. It was only in 1960 that the issue of the protection of wildlife and the prevention of certain species from the becoming extinct came into force. Then the need for the Wildlife Act reasons for the national wildlife in the domain of environmental, particularly wildlife, includes the following. India is a treasure trove of varied flora. So there are so many types of the provisions which are basically included in this Wildlife Protection Act. Then you have got some salient features of this act. It provides the protection of a listed species of animals, birds and animals. It provides the information for wildlife and advisory boards, wildlife wardens. Then it helps to become a part to the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. And this cities is also known as the Washington Convention. It was adopted as a result of the meeting of IUCN members. For the first time, a comprehensive list of the endangered wildlife species was prepared. And this act is a very, very important act, and it prohibits the hunting of the endangered species. And it also provides the establishment of wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, central zoo authority, etc., etc. And there are some of the main provisions of this Wildlife Act are prohibition of hunting, their protected areas, establishment of protected area like sanctuaries, national parks, conservation reserves, community reserves, schedule of the acts and all that. Then there are 6 schedules in this act. As far as this act is concerned, regulation of the trade and commerce, establishment of authorities like wildlife advisory boards, wildlife wardens, central zoo authority, wildlife crime control bureau, conservation of the habitats, penalties also. So these are all basically, and this law has already been amended in 2002, 2006, 2028, 22. Then the last act is the Forest Conservation Act 1980, and this act was basically acted by the Parliament in 1980, which ensures the conservation of forests and their resources. It came into force on October 25, 1980, containing 5 sections. A history of the Forest Conservation Act, because it was the first act basically enacted in 1865 and was replaced in 1927. However, it was more geared towards the protecting the commercial in interest of the British Empire in India. The act gave authority to the British to restrict tribal activities. After under the 1980 Act, the restriction was made on the use of forests for non-forest purposes. So then there are the main objectives like the protection of the forest along with the flora, fauna and other diverse activities, arrests the loss of biological biodiversity. It prevents forest lands being converted into agricultural, grazing or for any other commercial purposes. And the Forest Conservation Act aims to prevent deforestation, regulates the diversion of land for non-forest purposes, makes central government approved mandatory and prescribes penalties for violations. And these are the main provisions like restriction on the reserving of forests, regulation of the use of forest land, then prior approval of the requirements, and then constitution of the advisory committees, penalties for the violations. Then it was also amended in 1988. So these are all the acts of the environment which are very important for you to remember. So thank you students for watching this video. All the best. Take care.